guys, Kimber right here. Temperature sure has dropped recently. I might have to pop out halfway through this video just to get a cup of tea to keep myself warm. Challenge today was the kind of TV shows slash movies that I would watch as a kid. Now, to explain this a little more simpler, when I was a kid, we always had the television on in the background while we were opening presents. This did one or two things. Number one, it meant that me and my brother didn't open our presents all at once, i.e. open our presents at about 7 o'clock and finish opening by 12, and then either struggle to play with our presents until dinner time or sit there getting bored. And number two, it kept us entertained, particularly with a lot of the music that was being played at the time. So what I wanted to do was share with you a lot of the videos that or DVDs we were watching as a kid. We also got quite a lot of some of these TV shows are from videos that we pick up as well. So see if you can work out which ones. A lot of these are going to be quite detailed, but a lot of them are going to be quite simple. So without further ado, these are in no particular order. Let's start with the first one. So the first one, you'll have to excuse my throat, I've still got a sore throat, is The Snowman. Classic one every single Christmas. If you've ever heard of the song Walking in the Air, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It fits nowadays, considering the creator of The Snowman, Raymond Briggs, passed away this year. But it's a classic that we all watched. Over time, it's also become a stage production, so people watch the stage production on their television. But I'm talking about the cartoon that was based on the book that would play nearly every single Christmas. It's a fantastic piece of artwork, a wonderful story of a snowman and his boy traveling around the world. To an angelic voice, which is just so absolutely brilliant. If you ever want to picture or imagine yourself flying through the air on a Christmas day, probably not now because it's very, very cold, but on a Christmas day, you had everything. You had the boy building the snowman, you had him wrapping up warm, flying off to go and visit Santa, and then coming back. It has a very sad ending, being that the snowman would always melt the next day, but they'd always build a brand new one and fly off every single year, which is what makes it such a magical story. What makes it even more magical is there's no trigger. Often you have to say things like a magic spell nowadays to create the magic, but on this one, I think it was the boy's belief that just made the snowman come to life. If I'm remembering it rightly, it's been quite a while since I've watched it. So the second one is Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Now, there's no specific Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer movie that I can picture at this moment. I loved both versions. I loved the one that was made with Play-Doh a long time ago, and I loved the 1991 version, I think it was, that has that. Both of them are absolutely fantastic. They both tell the story brilliantly of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the idea that he is outcast by the rest of the reindeer. They take the mickey out of him because of his red nose. And then through different scenarios, so like in the Play-Doh one, he rescues his mom and dad and girlfriend, whose name I think is the same as Clarice in the other film. But After he runs away, his mum and dad and Clarice goes off and finds him, gets captured by the snowman. Rudolph, who's now grown into quite a young reindeer, goes off, uses his red nose to rescue everyone. In that version, I think there's two other characters as well. There's a peppermint finder miner, and there's an elf as well, who just wants to be a dentist. And when he returns, he hears that, Christmas is going to be cancelled. You've got pea soup fog out there. There's no way that they could fly it. And here's Rudolph with his shiny red nose leads the sleigh and rescues and saves Christmas. In the other version, which is just as magical and just as brilliant, it has Whitney Houston playing the horrible snow maid, the horrible snow witch, who in this version she's the one that creates the fog. Again, Rudolph gets teased. He runs away from home. He meets Slyly a fox. He meets Noah the bear, I think his name is, and he learns about friendship and he learns about how it is. Clarice breaks a rule. I think she crosses a snow bridge, which earlier on in the film, Snow Queen says, if someone crosses my bridge, I'm going to cause a snowstorm. As promised, she causes the snowstorm. Rudolph goes and rescues his girlfriend. In return, he also helps the Snow Witch. Because of the rules of the North Pole, the Snow Witch has to grant a wish. And Rudolph wishes her to be nice, and she turns into nice. Unfortunately, her turning into nice on the inside, the snow still has to run its course. She can't change that. But she's a lot more nicer. She lets him use her bridge. They travel back home. Santa sees his shiny red nose, and they go and fly up. And he impresses his dad, Blitzen, by leading the sleigh. And with that, I think that version I kind of prefer more than the Play-Doh one, because it has such brilliant songs. It has songs like "What About It," "What About His Nose," Christmas Town, and "We Can Make It," which I think is the best motivational song you could ever have if you're really struggling through Christmas time. Just play that song, and it really strikes it. I think it's also got Wonderful Christmas Time, which is the first time you see the reindeer fly. All of it just matches to one of the most magical films in the world, and Whitney Houston being in it as well is just a brilliant adaptation. Of course, both of them have the song Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, although both of them are sung very, very differently. We're going to stick with that one because another one on my list, now this is the one that I think is really clever, and it's Rudolph and the Island of Misfit Toys. It's basically a sequel to the original Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the one made out of Play-Doh, I think it was. This one's still made out of Play-Doh, but I think there's a bit of CGI still in it, a little bit. But this one is a continuation of the story. Even though Rudolph is now seen as a hero, he's still seen as, or he sees himself as still a little bit of a misfit, because he can't be himself, he feels. He feels like he cannot be himself. I should explain, in the earlier film, they already go and visit the island of Misfit Toys. And in this version, they then find a new place called Queen Camilla's Palace. Queen Camilla takes old and worn out toys, makes them beautiful again. Her problem, very similar to the Island of Misfit Toys, is she doesn't know what to do with the toys once they're fixed. And Rudolph suggests, as we do with the Island of Misfits Toys, Santa could come, if he's got time, to see Queen Clarice, pick up the toys that are ready to be taken, and they can return home. Interestingly, in this one, it also highlights a very key thing that happens to toys. When they become worn out, a lot of the toys get thrown away. And this is expressed in the main villain. Now, the main villain I actually quite love, because he's not a villain. He steals toys, this is absolutely true. But his motivation for stealing the toys is so they don't have to suffer the same thing he did. It turns out that the toy taker, as it's nicknamed, he himself was a toy that he feels was abandoned by his little boy as the boy grew up. He was moved from a box, he was moved onto a shelf, and then was just dumped in a dumpster for many, many years. He was broken, he was seamed, And it's quite touching when Santa reveals to him that in actual fact Stephen didn't forget him. In fact, Stephen was saving him um, for his little girl or boy when he married and had a kid. Unfortunately, that communication didn't happen to the parents, and it was the parents who threw out, or some misunderstanding had happened during that little bit, and he was thrown out accidentally. And Stephen had been trying to find him ever since, which is another thing that happens a lot of the time when you reflect on your old toys. You suddenly remember a toy that you had many, many years ago, and what happened to it. It either grew so torn apart that it's now gone. I'll give you a little bit of an example. My mom recently gave me this teddy, which I had completely forgotten about. I don't even remember receiving it, to be perfectly honest. It had been given to me by an aunt when I was very, 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 very young. And now it's losing a leg. One of his eyes has gone. But my mom gave him to me and asked me, did I want to throw it away? I don't remember it in particular. I don't remember even receiving it, so it must have been very young when I received it. But the first thing I said to my mum was, "Mum, let me fix it. Let me see if I can fix it." Excuse my coughing. I don't know if it's possible for me to fix it. It's never going to look the exact same again. But the one thing that I said was, I did not want to get rid of it. I wanted to keep it. And I hope to be able to fix it. Maybe on one of these videos I'll show you trying to fix it. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. The good news is that Mr. Cuddles, who is the enemy, I should say spoiler alert before I actually started. Oops. Mr. Cuddles reveals, goes back to not back to the boy that he had, not to Stephen, but to his daughter. And Stephen sees it and remembers that Santa is under the impression that Santa gave it back. But it's a happy ending throughout of it for everyone in the entire. You've got all the other guys back. You've got the peppermint guy back. You've got the abominable snowman, who by this point does have sneaks, but I think he's got quite less sharp teeth. And you get a little bit of an idea of Hermie as well. You get more of a backstory to Hermie the elf. Hermie the elf was the elf that was with Rudolph on the first episode. Like Rudolph in the first movie, he also was a bit of an outsider. He was the guy who wanted to be a dentist. In this film, he succeeds. He's a dentist. He's a well-known dentist. He's been to dentist school. And whereas Rudolph's idea was that he wanted to have a normal nose because he believed he would have a normal life if he had a normal nose, and the movie's kind of persuading him that actually, him having his nose is actually what makes him unique. In the other version, for Hermie the elf has a crush on the Tooth Fairy, and that's his aim. All his aim. He wants to date the Tooth Fairy. And at the end of the film, Queen Clarice makes it doable. They go out on their date. We don't know if the date succeeded because he faints on the floor. But he ends up going on his dates, and we wish him the best of luck. And I think he would have been a good match. So for the next one, I'm kind of cheating a little bit because this one didn't come out Christmas Day, if my memory is correct. I did, for a very long time, have it recorded. And this would be put in, and I would watch it on Christmas or before Christmas to kind of keep me up. So this comes in the same tradition that happens with the BBC nowadays. So if you ever watch CBBC, you will see all the CBBC live action characters. Bernard Cribbins did one at one point. He was in a panto, sitting up in the audience with his dog telling the story. Well, this happened during my day as well, but not quite Christmas panto kind of like. Although it did have panto in it. There was one version that I do remember very, very well, and this is a live action recording of the Demon Headmaster takes over Christmas. Now, back when I was a kid, there used to be a TV series called The Demon Headmaster. There's a book out as well. I'm hoping the book is still in print. If not, please look for it. It's an absolute brilliant book. To give you a hindsight, the Demon Headmaster is this hypnotic headmaster um, who would make children obey by hypnotizing them. And he gets away with it for years. He does world domination as well quite a lot. In this version, he's trying to take over television. So his ideology of a good television is no cartoons, no comedy, no wit, no silliness. Just, if I remember correctly, schools programs, open university, and census news 24 hours a day. That would drive me insane. I mean, the idea of a good cartoon is it inspires. Fireman Sam inspires a lot of people to become firefighters. Postman Pat, probably not right now, but would have inspired you to become a postman. All those kind of things inspire you to a future. But the Demon Headmaster tries to take over, and it's a live action story of them trying to defeat the Demon Headmaster. They have many fantastic special guests at the time. So they had Dave Benson Phillips, who at the time was hosting Get Your Own Back, and actually does a live version of Get Your Own Back on the show. It had Katie Hill, who was a host of Blue Peter. It had Peter Simon, Josie, whose surname I've completely forgotten, and Michaela Struyton, who at the time was hosting the Real Wild Show, which was a show about animals. It also had special guests such as Damage. It had one of the main people who was also hosting was a band at the time called North and South, and they perform a song called No Sweat, which is quite ironic because that's what they say throughout all of it. This film is special to me because it's the first time I ever heard two jokes. The first joke, and it's a little bit odd. Nowadays, you wouldn't get it. As a kid, I remember I didn't get it, and it's part of the reason I love it because of the good camera. Whoever did the camera editing, I hope he got a raise because a lot of the stuff was pretty funny. And it was Bill and Ben are at home, right? And Bill was in the bath, and he went blah 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 blah. And Ben said, "If that smells, you're dead." If you've ever seen Bill and Ben the Flower Pot Men, you will know the backdrop to that show. But what I love about the joke is there's a camera angle that I think earns the guy his money, where you get two different reactions. You get the adults laughing because they know the butt of the joke. And then just then you had the perfect camera angle of a mum having to explain to her two children who Bill and Ben, the Flower Pot Men, were. And that was just made the joke so much more funnier. The fact that you had the adults behind them laughing and you had the poor mum explaining to the kids why the joke was so funny, which probably explains why that joke only had 1%, because about probably half the audience got it and the other half laughed shortly afterwards once it was explained. But the other one, this is before Katie Hill came on the show, and it had they think that they failed. They're on their last hope, and they turn to one of the guys who's currently on the phone, and the guy says over the phone, "Right, Roger and out." And Peter Simon says, "How is Roger?" And the guy replies, "I don't know. He was out." It's fun. It was funny in those days. I don't know if it's funny now, but it was still hilarious to me. And then the joke kind of carries on with them saying, "You're not the Blue Peter hit squad," hence Katie Hill coming on a little bit later. And he goes, "Oh no, I phoned for us pizza." And then I phoned the Pupita Hit Squad. Classic. It's just amazing. One thing I forgot is that it also hosts. So it had another special guest called Paul and Barry Chuckle. Or should I say Paul and the late Barry Chuckle, because Barry passed away a little while ago. But this was during the time when Paul and Barry were involved in the Chuckle Brothers and were quite popular. And they saved the day. The demon headmaster gets defeated. The control of the TV, what goes on the TV, returns to the BBC, and everything goes back to exactly the way it should be and exactly the way it was. It also had two people from Grange Hill. One from Grange Hill, one from Byker Grove. And it had another famous one who I think still hosts shows today. To this day, he's a fantastic presenter. Unfortunately, I've forgotten his name. I put it up here if I can remember. But I always loved putting it on. Unfortunately, I don't know if I can continue doing it because it's still on VHS. But it's one of the greatest shows, and I think it's fantastic. I'm hoping it appears on YouTube at some point. If not, I'm hoping that somewhere in the archive the BBC will put it back on. I really don't know. Moving on to the next one, we have the Mr. Men. The Mr. Men, I'm not talking about the brand new Mr. Men because I look at them now and go, what is that? I'm talking about the Mr. Men that existed when Roger Hargreaves was still writing it. I'm not saying Adam Hargreaves has ruined it, because when he continued doing the books after his father passed away, he was absolutely fantastic. I don't know what's happened to the Mr. Men recently. I'm not happy with a lot of the changes that have happened to my childhood heroes. Thomas is another one. But this, during the time when I think it was Roger was still in control of the Mr. Men, a children's Christmas edition of the Mr. Men came out. Now this one kind of had a story behind it, but it also had a kind of insight to how people prepare for Christmas. So it starts off with a TV newsreel report starring Mr. Clever and Little Miss Star. And they start off by saying, how people preparing for Christmas. You've got Mr. Model can't decide whether he's going to the shops or staying at home. You got Little Miss Scatterbrain will go to the shops at some point, but she's looking for a hat, which happens to be on her head. Little Miss Late is always late. And then you get a news report from Mr. Nosy saying there's something going on in Mr. Land. Something happens with Santa. The Mr. Men save the day, and they all end in Mr. Chatterbox's room shouting Merry Christmas to everyone. I just love it. I think it's a fantastic show. This one is available on YouTube. By all means, check it out. But it's a very interesting one because you can sort of look at the different characters and how they work. To give you an idea, part of the rescue party that go to save Santa in the show is Mr. Strong, Mr. Rush, Mr. Busy, Miss Magic, and Mr. Impossible. Mr. Impossible had to be part of the performance because they basically had to try and celebrate save Christmas in 1 hour. That's impossible. Not with Mr. Impossible, it's not. It's an absolutely fantastic show and you need to go check it out. It's called Mr. Men Saves Christmas. It is available on YouTube. Have a look at it. Let me know in the comments what you think of it. Now with this one, again, I'm not being too specific because there's two particular Christmas ones that I actually enjoy with the Sooty Show. Now in the first one, I'm not talking about the ones when they did Panto, because although those ones are really, really good, These ones have kind of a Christmas storyline to it, and that's why I love it so much. So in this one, Santa, in the first Sooty Show episode. Sorry, I need to stop and get some water because as you can hear, my throat is really sore. Sorry about that. Where was I? Oh yeah, so in the first Sooty Show that I want to talk about, they're both hosted by Matthew Cribbins, who is the son to Harry Cribbins, Harry Corbett, beg your pardon, who was the original creator of Sooty. Matthew took over when Harry was ready to retire. And during his time, there was actually 3 different shows that they did for Christmas. But these 2 are the ones that stick with me. So the first one, Matthew wakes up. He goes downstairs to open a present. Finds the Sooty gang had been in the presents all this time. They then open presents. During which point, one of the presents which they then give to Matthew is a set of bells. Now, this is the first time I've ever heard this children's nursery rhyme, this Christmas theme. It's called Home is Where the Heart Is. I've never heard it anywhere else, and I'm not sure I'm able to find it now. But it's where I was first introduced to it. It also has, before Richard Cordell was looking after Sooty, this guy came in, dressed as Santa, came to see Sooty, did them a couple of amazing magic tricks, and during which Sooty suddenly remembered that there were some kids in the hospital during Christmas Day who wouldn't be able to celebrate Christmas with their families. So Matthew and Sooty went to go and cheer them up. They then come back to find out that they'd forgotten that they were going to go and that they had already said that they were going to go and see the theatre and arrange a Christmas dinner. Except they'd forgotten to... I'll explain it the way they explain it. Sue and Sweep had been left to sort everything out. Sue had called the theatre to ask for tickets, but the tickets had all sold out. There was no way that they could go. And then Matthew says, oh, well, we've got the Christmas dinner. We can still organise the Christmas dinner. And Sue says, well, no, I thought that Sweep was going to sort out the food. And then Sweep reveals that he thought that Sue was sorting out the food. So they've got no food. So they've got no Christmas dinner. Luckily, Sooty is a magician, so he waves his magic wand. And they appear at the show that they're going to go and watch. They get involved in the show because it's an interactive show, and then they reveal that they haven't got a Christmas dinner. So I can't remember who they'd gone to see, but he'd magicked a Christmas dinner right in front, and they finish with a nice little Christmas song and a Christmas dinner. That was the first one. The second one was, we kind of arrived just as Matthew's having an afternoon nap from celebrating Christmas. He reveals their kind of day-to-day routine. So it starts with the Sooty gang opening their presents. And then Matthew reveals that they then had sort of a party, which is where we kind of join afterwards, where he had collapsed on the floor. During which point he finds the presents that they'd originally opened in the morning. And it's revealed that even though that they had enjoyed and loved their presents, they were currently upstairs with the wrapping paper and the boxes having a bit of a war fight, which was hilarious to kind of see. So Matthew's now made the dinner. They then come down. Problem is they're not hungry because they had a huge lunch. Huge, ginormous lunch. They managed to get their appetite back together. And it finishes with Sooty and Matthew talking about the one time where they met Santa during the summer, which turned out to be a couple of robbers. It is a fantastic show. I'm probably not selling it very well. If you want to go, type in Sooty Show Christmas, and both of them should show up if they're still available on YouTube, which last I checked they were. This other one is available on YouTube, and is, I think, available on some free downloads, so please, by all means, check it out. But I certainly know that it's available on YouTube. This is something I'd also watched during the show, during my time as a kid, and was available on a recording. I don't know if it still is. It also has Dave Benson Phillips, because as well as doing Get Your Own Back, he was also partly hosting Fun Song Factory alongside some of the regulars. And Dave Benson Phillips was in a show called Fun Song Factory, and they did a Christmas edition. Now, the basic story of the Christmas edition is they've decided that they're going to stay up and wait for Santa, but they decide to have a bit of fun. So the factory chooses certain songs and nursery rhymes and games for them to play as they wait for Santa. Unfortunately, Santa grants a little magic, sends them off to sleep, leaves them loads of presents, leaves them a card, and they wake up, realise they've missed Santa, and they go off to celebrate, and they dance around the tree, wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. It's a lot more fun when you watch it. By all means, please check it out. But it is a super fun show to watch. As you know, I'm a Disney fan, so I had to have a Disney one in here. And that Disney one, there are many different versions of Disney ones, but the one I watched as a kid, I found many others since being a kid, but this is the one that I remember as a kid, and it was Belle's Enchanted Christmas. It's one of the specials that came out over the Christmas period. Belle's Enchanted Christmas basically tells the story of Belle trying to introduce the Christmas spirit into the Beast castle. The Beast is kind of reluctant because we find out through the show that was the day that he was enchanted. It was during Christmas. He was already in a pretty bad mood because of his presents. It's also where we meet Maestro, called Maestro, who's basically a organ. And the organ is voiced by a guy named Tim Curry. Now, interestingly, Tim Curry actually auditioned to play or at least voice the Beast in the old cartoon version. And he later came back to voice Maestro in this Christmas edition. The whole story is told through Mrs. Potts' eyes, because it starts off with Lumiere and Cogsworth, as always, having an argument on who saved Christmas that particular period. And Chip wants to know what the real story is, so rather than face these two boys who are arguing, he goes to his mum and asks what happened, and Belle tells the story of what had happened, and it finishes with Belle explaining that the one who really saved Christmas was, of course, Belle. And it's a fantastic. It also introduces us to another character named Fifel. Now, Fifel is a small flute, and he was just a flute player for the orchestra, just a random flute player. If you imagine, there were so many different people in the orchestra, but the only one that we meet is Fifel and Maestro. I imagine the others were probably locked up somewhere or were trying to hide from the Beast at that particular moment. The only two that were brave enough, probably because for some bizarre reason Fifel was more close to Maestro. But I think it was because Fifel's main aim was he always wanted a solo. Because he was a flute, he believed he would never get a solo. So Maestro says to him throughout the whole show, if you do my thing, if you keep Belle and Beast separate from each other, I will grant you a solo in my piece. And Fievel in he slowly starts to not like where Maestro is going. He starts to also get to know Belle, realizes that the Belle is perfect for the Beast, and he kind of sticks to Belle Belle's side. And as a result, Maestro reveals to him that the paper that was supposed to be his solo was blank all along. He was never going to grant Fievel a solo. But at the end of the film, not only does Fievel get his solo, which he'd always wanted, he's also called Maestro. So he takes over Maestro's role as a reward for what he did on that particular day. And that's got to be the greatest reward. You know, you get misled throughout your goals, and then someone comes, and then when you do a really good deed, you get rewarded, and that was his reward. He finally got the solo that he'd always wanted, but not just that, he's also got the Maestro role, which is absolutely fantastic, absolutely brilliant. It's a fantastic show. By all means, check it out. Actually, I don't know if many people know this next one. It's a show called Annabella's Wish. It's based, I think, in a Norwegian legend. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I love it because it's so incredibly clever. So Annabelle's Wish is the story of a young cow that's born on Christmas Eve. And he's presented to this young boy. This young boy had an accident when he was really young, so he could no longer talk. And as a result, he's been to the best doctors. He's completely mute. There's no hope of him ever getting his voice back. And yet somehow he and Annabelle end up with the best friendships in the world. It also has a very horrible neighbour and his two boys, who get their comeuppance at the end of the film. But also a rich aunt. Now the story is that the rich aunt turned down originally the idea of adopting the little boy when he was a lot more younger. But due to some bizarre motive, which is that she doesn't want to be alone for Christmas, she starts having an interest in the boy and wanting to adopt him, and starts coming up with ideas like, you know, he'll go to the best schools, they'll send him to the best doctors, and he'll eventually learn how to speak. In the end, she comes up with a horrible motivation for him that in a year, if he can't speak, due to a clause in the original agreement that they had, that the boy would be with the grandfather, he would be automatically given to the auntie, who would better his needs, his welfare. I mean, who knows what the boy was absolutely happy and fine in the farm. But no, the auntie's really rich, and that's motivation enough to give the boy over to the auntie. I didn't get it either. But the point was, I should probably explain why it's called Annabelle's Wish. Annabelle's wish at the time, throughout the whole film, is that she wants to fly. She wants to fly like the reindeer. She wants to be able to fly and pull the reindeer, just like Santa's reindeer. And then after her mum tells her that if she's a really good, she can ask Santa for one wish. And she's been really good, so she asks Santa for one wish. And her wish is so incredibly special. It changes the boy's life, it changes hers, it changes everyone's life. And it has such a touching, happy ending. I love the fact that the story's narrator is never revealed. Because if you revealed who the narrator was, the whole story would be completely ruined. I'm trying by all means, see the show, and then you'll understand exactly what I'm saying. This is the one thing I'm not going to spoil, because if I say what Annabelle's wish was, it's going to ruin everything. But by all means, check it out, because it is it's a fantastic and really touching story to be able to watch. This one is a favourite of mine, but it's not everybody's favourite. I've heard many different people say that this isn't very, very good. To me, it's the best interpretation of the Christmas Carol story, and it's the Muppet Christmas Carol. The Muppet Christmas Carol was the first film that was created after Jim Henson passed away, and stars Michael Caine as Ebenezer Scrooge. It's a fantastic show. To me, it's special because it's one of the few. It's a great character development for one of the Muppets, being Gonzo. Throughout most of the films and throughout most of the TV shows, Gonzo is always known as a whatever, because there's no. I mean, as a kid, I always thought, before we reveal exactly what he was, I always thought he was just, a misfit armadillo or anteater because of his long nose. In Muppet's Christmas Carol, he's actually given a character to play. He's given the role of Charles Dickens. So he's no longer a whatever, he's a somebody at the moment. It isn't until Muppets in Space that we actually find out who Gonzo actually is. And it's a great character development. But Gonzo is playing Charles Dickens. Rizzo's playing himself, but he's always with Gonzo. Michael Caine's playing Ebenezer Scrooge. It follows the same criteria as the book. Ebenezer Scrooge is someone who absolutely hates Christmas, and he gets visited by three spirits, all played by Muppets, who teach him the error of his ways. I think the ending is the most powerful, because if you read the original book, Ebenezer Scrooge spends Christmas with his niece and nephew, which he kind of does in here as well. He kind of visits them, gives them a present, gives them all best wishes, then walks off. In the book, he spends the whole of Christmas. He spends the whole of Christmas with his niece, with his nephew and his partner, just having a good time, having Christmas dinner, having Christmas parties. And then the next day, he pops into work an hour early. He watches his clerk, Jiminy Cricket, come in quite sheepishly because he's a little bit late. At first gives him a bit of a scolding, and then reveals that he's going to make him his partner. He's going to change his life forever. And of course he's going to be a second father to Tiny Tim. In the Muppets Christmas Carol version, he actually goes to Bob Cratchit's house. And he arrives at Bob Cratchit's house, played by Kermit the Frog. He gets told off by Mrs. Cratchit, of course, played by Miss Piggy. And I just love the fact that the whole sentence is basically, and therefore Bob Cratchit, and therefore you can leave this house at once. And therefore I'm about to raise your salary. Oh, and I'm typical Miss Piggy going off into a complete rampage, and then both of them say, pardon? Because they've just clogged what he's just said. And it's just a fantastic way to change. You've got the old Ebenezer Scrooge, and then you've got him slowly revealing himself, changing into a great show. It's a great performance by Michael Caine, and a great performance by all of the Muppets, and just so full of joy. It's just so amazing. It certainly is something to watch. And of course, you've got all the great songs as well. Um, you've got the famous Ebenezer Scrooge song. You've got Faithful Heart, which I always listen to during Christmas time because it's just so brilliant. Um, sorry, I'm so ill. I just can't think today. I'm gonna kick myself later. I really am. I'll put the names of two of the songs up here later on when I can think. But it is a fantastic show, and by all means, sorry, something came on my screen. And by all means, watch it because it is a fantastic show. Moving on to that, obviously, I'm not going to just stick with cartoons because there is a live action show that I do love. And it's Miracle on 39th Street. It's the one that stars Mara Wilson as a very, 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 very young girl. I don't know if it's the first thing that she did as an actress, but it certainly was before she did Thomas and the Magic Railway, and certainly before she did Matilda. She was so young at the time. She was just so brilliant. But it also starred, I need to get the name right because I know there's two people. Richard Attenborough playing Kris Kringle, who is a guy who claims to be Santa Claus. And the question throughout the whole film is he Santa Claus or is he someone who's just a lunatic? And in the end, I'm not going to spoil the story because I've had so many arguments about it. I even was watching it during a rainy day at school, and I mean literal rainy day, not just a random day. And we got to the bit where it was about to reveal, and unfortunately, break ended. And the guy was continuing on at me because they knew that I believed in Santa Claus, and they were like, "Oh, could you see? There's no such thing as Santa Claus. Santa Claus doesn't exist." And I'm like, "You didn't watch the end of the film. Why are you judging it based on that? Watch the end of the film. You didn't see the whole situation." I mean, the whole point of Santa is, yeah, he might not be real. But if you don't believe in Santa Claus, how can you believe in yourself? It's just complete bollocks. It's just complete rubbish. And this is what the world has come to. And I'm not in the mood to talk politics right now. It is one of the most greatest films. I actually do have a copy on my bookshelf, and I will be watching it later. But one of the things I love is the fact that she stands on her boss after he's arrested and challenges them to say that, one of their own is currently locked up in jail. And you guys need to decide whether you do believe in Santa Claus. And they start a campaign around the entire world, around the whole of New York, where you see a load of people declaring that they believe in Santa Claus. They always have. And it's not just children, it's adults as well. So when you've got something as powerful as that, don't deny it. Now, you guys will probably have guessed from figures like this that I'm a huge Pokemon fan. And round about the time Pokemon was very hyped, two VHS videos came out. Both of them were Christmas editions. And both of them had 2 Christmas episodes in them. Both of them kind of depicted both of them kind of depicted Pikachu and, at the time, Ash's gang. So it kind of varies as it went on. It was the original and Pokemon Johto, called Pokemon Johto group in the first video, and then it kind of expanded to the other ones as well. But it followed the same principle. So you had Pikachu always looking after Togepi. You had one episode where they had discovered snow for the first time and was skating around the ice. You had another one where they'd heard a noise and gone out, and poor Santa was kneeling nearby his Stantler, his reindeer, and his Stantler had caught a cold. So the Pokemon gang offered to help Santa rescue his reindeer by bringing him back to health, so he can pull the sleigh yet again. And there's other versions as well. Those are the only two right now that my sick head can remember, because I'm so ill. I'm struggling to. I'm really sorry for the poorness of this video. I'm really struggling. I'm going to do two more. I was hoping to do a little more, but I'm going to do two more, and then I really need to stop, because I might just shut my eyes for a bit. This video is going to be really, really late because I'm not well. I'm not well at all. I'm so ill. So the two that I'm going to do really, really quickly, unfortunately. I had hoped this quality would hopefully be a lot more better, but I'm fighting illness right now. I'm really, really sorry. But the one that I wanted, oh my god, the one that I wanted to talk about, as my mum was a Doctor Who fan, one of our biggest traditions was watching, when Christopher Eccleston started off as the Doctor, they started a tradition of Christmas shows. You had David Tennant first being introduced as the Doctor, and then you had a sort of Christmas Carol version with Matt Smith's Doctor. You had there was another one. I'm sorry, I'm really struggling at the moment. There were so many Christmas editions that I wish I could be able to tell you, but I'm really struggling at the moment. It's hard. So I'm going to do the two that I mentioned. Christopher Eccleston never did a Christmas edition. That fell onto David Tennant. The Sycorax have threatened humanity. At the time, they didn't know they were Sycorax, but the Sycorax have arrived. It's the first time that you ever meet Santa being Santa robots. You also have Rose's mum being attacked by a Christmas tree. And you have many different versions. I'm sorry. I'm going to do the next one really, really quick, and then I'm going to stop. I'm really, really sorry. So the last one that I want to talk about is Thomas and Friends, the missing Christmas tree. There are many, many Thomas the Tank Engine Christmas episodes, but this is the one that I love. It was the first one that I saw, read by Ringo Starr, star of the Beatles. And the story is that Thomas goes up to collect the Christmas tree, but he gets caught in a snowdrift. The engines find out, and they rescue him, and they bring him back just in time for him to celebrate Christmas. It's such a touching story. The other one that I love, I think people end up getting trapped in a snowstorm, and Thomas, Percy, Terence, and Harold go to rescue the people, and Toby late at night, the village want to say thank you, so they decorate the shed to look all Christmassy, just for the engines to say thank you. I'm really sorry this video is both long and the last two are incredibly short, but I need to go and get some cough medicine and I need a break. I'm really sorry about the quality of this video, but I'm really struggling with illness right now. I'm hoping to feel a lot better tomorrow when I do tomorrow's challenge, but I'm really struggling with this one right now. I wanted to go into more detail, but I'm really struggling to keep my voice as one tone. I'm going to stop the video here, but I hope to see you guys again soon. If I think of any others while I'm doing editing, it'll appear in the next video. But until then, stay safe, stay well, keep warm, try not to be as ill as I am, and I hope to see you guys again soon. See you guys later.